As we celebrate Black History Month, we look back at the civil rights movement that helped shape Louisville, including the amazing courage of men and women who stood up for what was right, even when their hometown didn't see them as being equal. Spectrum News 1's Chelsea Washington has a closer look.
While Louisville didn't see some of the atrocities other southern cities experienced during the civil rights movement, the struggle was still real. Until the 1960s, things like grabbing lunch at a restaurant, staying at certain hotels, or even going to a public library were out of the question for African Americans in Louisville. To understand the history, a good place to start is the Kentucky Center for African American Heritage. The first stop is the Gallery of Great Black Kentuckians. The executive director says it's important to start with some key players during the days of segregation.
And within that gallery of Great Black Kentuckians are a number of people who have been involved in the civil rights movement, specifically here in Louisville, but also throughout Kentucky. So one of them is Charles Anderson. And Anderson was Kentucky's first black legislator. Albert E. Menzies. He was a member of Kentucky State Board of Education. He was responsible for developing the first free public library located here in Louisville, which is now called the West End Library. Another figure is Georgia Davis Powers, right? She was the first black person to hold a seat in the Kentucky State Senate. Another important figure is Lyman T. Johnson. He was from Louisville, but he's known statewide for his efforts to desegregate and integrate the University of Kentucky.
Some might consider Frank L. Stanley Sr. one of the most influential leaders. Stanley was the publisher of the Louisville Defender, who also drafted legislation that led to the desegregation of Kentucky's colleges and universities.
He dedicated his life to covering issues that were pertinent to black people and the black community. He was also involved in helping to shape civil rights policy on a national level as well as on a state level. He had influence from Truman to Johnson. He had access to these presidents and had profound influence on them in terms of their thinking about civil rights nationally.
And of course, you can't talk about the movement in Louisville without mentioning Muhammad Ali.
He spoke truth to power, all right? He didn't bite his tongue. He pretty much said what he meant. His nickname is the Louisville Lip, all right, and that was an attempt to, belittle him, but really his lips, the words that came off of his lips were very important words as it related to black people.
Our final stop is a photo exhibit called 2 Centuries of Black Louisville, Civil Rights at a Glance.
Louisville and Kentucky in general was a very important state. We were doing things that most people didn't know about, and we were getting gains that most places weren't getting at that time. So Louisville is a very important place when it comes to civil rights as a border state.
Inside the exhibit, you'll see photos of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., young people participating at sit-ins at the Blue Board Cafe in the 1968 civil disorder at 28th Street and Greenwood Avenue.
And at that time, we felt, meaning black people felt, that we were citizens of this Commonwealth, and we were also citizens of the United States. And we deserve to enjoy all rights and freedoms that all other citizens enjoyed.
The movement spanned the state from the March on Frankfort to civil unrest in northern Kentucky. But Louisville's contributions will always stand in their own place and time as an important piece of history. Chelsea Washington, Spectrum News 1.
And the Kentucky Center for African American Heritage is open Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m.